Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Photo Brigade Podcast. I'm Robert Kaplan. I'm here today with Luke Copping. How you doing, Luke?
I'm good, Robert. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for making it down from Buffalo. Mm-hmm. You're from Buffalo.
I'm from Buffalo.
I don't know if I've had a photographer on the podcast from Buffalo yet, so
I think it's about time then.
I think it's about time that we represent northern New York.
The other part of New York.
The other.
Oh, northern New York. That's no, we're western New York.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't even know outside of Manhattan,
Yeah.
I'm pretty much
Everyone
clueless.
calls it northern New York unless you're in Buffalo.
Oh, okay.
We're pretty hard line on it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, anyhow, before we get started, I just want to say thanks to Adorama for letting us use their event space for our podcast and all our other events that we do. So please check them out, adorama.com/events. Also, you're watching on Facebook. If you're watching on Facebook Live, please hit the subscribe button so that you can be updated whenever we have our live broadcast start. We do podcasts, events. We even had a concert just the other day at Adorama Live Studio. Oh gosh, I forget. Live Stage, I think it's called. Adorama Live Stage at the CBS radio studio. That was awesome. So check our Facebook for all of that. And also just follow us on all our social media, because that's what it's all about. So a quick thank you again to Adorama, Canon Professional Services for all your support, Tenba Bags, and of course Luke for making his way down from Buffalo. So Luke, let's give some people a little bit of a background about you. You are explain your background.
So I'm primarily an editorial and portrait photographer. I service clients in advertising, corporate direct, a lot of magazines. I do some animal work as well.
Some animal work, yeah. And so, right, we'll go through, you do some work with rescue dogs.
I do a lot of work with rescue dogs, especially in our local shelters in Western New York. I donate a lot of my time, work extensively with the city shelter there and some great rescue programs, especially with pit bulls and other animal breeds that are kind of the victims of breed-specific discrimination. They have hard times getting adopted because of the stigma about them.
Wow. And so it looks like you put these dogs into full-on studios.
Oh, yeah. I have a great benefit of my studio is half a block away from the city animal shelter.
Oh, really?
So they get to go for their little walk, come to my studio.
Aww.
We've got a big space, throw toys at them, they get to run around. It's a fun little day for them.
Oh, that's
too.
really cool.
Yeah.
So what are these photos of the dogs here? What do you use, or how are they used? Do you help them get adopted?
Yeah,
Is
primarily
that
they're to drive adoption, especially with bully breed animals, which I'll use it because it's common parlance. I really hate that term. But
what was the term?
Bully breed.
Oh, okay.
So
I see.
pit bulls, mastiffs, Rottweilers, stuff like that. Dogs that have a stigma about them because of dog fighting or the perception of them being aggressive breeds, which they're really not. Pit bulls for decades were heralded as the nanny breed. They were great with families, great with kids. But there are overflowing shelters, not just in Buffalo, all over the country, where pit bulls have a hard time getting adopted. So portraits help people make a connection.
And I've heard that even pit bulls are being outlawed in some towns or places.
Just in Montreal, Canada, they just are initiating a full-on pit bull ban, which is going to lead, sadly, to the euthanasia of several hundred animals that are very adoptable.
Really? Mm-hmm. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's awful. So beyond the obviously you're volunteering to do this work, and you have a studio. That's really cool.
Yes.
So you have most of your clients come to you, or do you do most of your stuff? I mean, like I'm seeing here, this is some on-location work. These are Rust Belt entrepreneurs.
This series, a lot of entrepreneurs, artisans, small business people in the Rust Belt, specifically Buffalo, but also cities like Cleveland and Detroit, who are young entrepreneurs, young business people who are working really, really hard to revitalize these areas. And they could be in anything from the restaurant industry to designers to craftspeople that are doing really, really interesting things. They're going to these cities that people are saying the economy in this city is dead. Things are tough here. And they're really turning it around. Buffalo is going through an amazing renaissance right now. And it's really, really driven by young entrepreneurs.
And so is this a project that you've put on yourself, or is this something that you're working
this is definitely a personal project, although it has spun out into kind of coalescing into some commercial work. A couple years ago, I went through a big kind of breakdown with my photography. I was working in Toronto a lot. I was primarily shooting style work, hair and cosmetics, and it just wasn't sitting well with me. I wasn't really feeling it. I just didn't connect to that kind of work. I wanted to Not to say anything bad against people who shoot that kind of work and really connect with it and love it. That's great, but I didn't. And I wanted to shoot work that I felt was less disposable to me, that had more of a story behind it. That I love underdog stories, and Buffalo is a great underdog story, the stuff that's going on there right now. So all of these entrepreneurs are people who at one point or another were really told, like, you can't do this here. You can't do this in Buffalo. There's no market for it. There's no business doing this here. And they're proving people wrong. There's amazing business stories. And as my career has taken off, they've taken off with me. Some of these people have now gone on to like nationally recognized businesses. They've done really, really interesting and important things. Some of the stories that are really notable, I mean, there's a guy, a woodworker in Buffalo, who left a really nice kind of like advertising marketing job to deal with Buffalo's housing crisis. There's all these abandoned homes in Buffalo that are being knocked down or destroyed by the city, hundreds of years old, with all this wood that's just being burned and demolished. And he's rescuing this wood from these homes, turning it into amazing handcrafted furniture and woodwork. And his business is doing great. He works with West Elm now.
With West Elm, wow.
Yep. Another story, these two high school teachers, they had this little kind of garage ice cream making club, and they've turned it into this amazingly well-regarded like ice cream brand that has gotten attention from not just locally, but they're being carried in major chains now. They're a huge kind of like cult phenomenon in Western New York. They've gotten coverage from some big social media names. People who, manage the social media for the Olympics were tweeting about them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I should have mentioned in your intro here that you are also, your title is Vice President.
Yeah, I'm the Vice Chairman of the National Board of ASMP.
ASMP, American Society of Media Photographers. This is the website that folks can go to.
Yeah.
Can you give a sort of synopsis of what ASMP is for our listeners who might not know?
ASMP is a trade association for photographers. We've been around for a long time, since 1944. And we've had some amazing members in the past. Stanley Kubrick was a member, Richard Avedon was a member, Philippe Halsman was a member. And we're really dedicated to educating photographers about the business of photography, how to be sustainable, how to manage your business in a way that adheres to good business ethics, that protects you as a creative. And to that end, we offer education for photographers. We're also highly involved in government legislation for photographers, be it copyright, artist rights, stuff like that.
Gotcha. So what do you personally do with regards to ASMP? Like, what is your role? How do you help photographers? And,
Sure.
And how can photographers become part of this, and what can they expect?
Sure. So right now, my primary role with ASMP is I'm handling a lot of the media and outreach, specifically as it relates to emerging photographers, young students coming into the industry, people who are in their first 5 or 6 years of business, people who are coming into this outside of the realm of how a lot of people of older generations came into photography. They went to school or they assisted. Some of these people are transitioning from other careers. Photography is a second career for them. There's a lot of great educational material out there for how to be a good photographer. I mean, you can go online onto YouTube, onto Flurn or F-Stoppers and find pretty much anything about retouching, composition, shooting. But there's not a lot of education out there for the business, how to actually be a sustainable and successful photographer.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more that goes into business than just being a good photographer.
Oh, yeah, sure. One of my mentors always said that taking pictures is the easiest part about running a successful photography business. It's all the other hats you have to wear. And at the end of the day, we're not just artists, we're small business people.
Yep. So so you talk about media outreach, keeping out there. You have your Instagram. How do you feel about social and using social? How does ASMP feel about it?
Sure. I love social media, but I think you also have to have a very discernible strategy with how you use social media to market yourself as an artist these days. In past years, even just up until recently, most trade associations have been very, very concerned about the terms of service of social media,
right?
How it relates to copyright, how it relates to termination of terms of services. And those have all been very, very important. At the same time, it's an incredible platform for photographers to use for self-publishing, for breaking into markets they've never really been able to break into before. So you can't just approach social media with this notion of, I'm going to put everything up there all at once. At the same time, you also can't be fearful of it. I have a lot of friends who are older photographers who have this mindset of, I'm not putting anything on Facebook, they're going to steal my work. I'm not going to put anything on Instagram, it's going to get stolen, they're going to use it. You can put stuff out there mindfully. You can put stuff out there, personal projects that you want out in the world. You want to be spread, you want to be disseminated.
Well, what's amazing to me is that I've found that talking to different art directors and photographers and so on, they say that they are found through social media now.
Absolutely.
There are major advertising art directors and so on that ask photographers not what's your website, they say what's your Instagram handle, so they can look at your work.
Totally.
Which is so interesting to me because in the past I've always there was a point at which I said, there's no way that I would put a professional photo on Instagram. It was all photos from my mobile phone, from my iPhone, etc. And nowadays, it's different. Now I almost don't even want to put my cell phone photos up because it almost dumbs down a little bit. I mean, everyone can take a great photo on their iPhone, certainly, but it almost behooves a photographer to put their work up on Instagram and social media.
Absolutely. It's such an easily accessible, easily digestible platform for us to use as visual creatives.
Okay.
At the same time, I don't think there's anything wrong with putting up some personal stuff. I think it's really important these days to be mindful of the fact that we're more than just our work, especially in this industry. We have to differentiate ourselves. Sometimes that can come as personality, the story, the behind the scenes stuff.
Sure.
Nobody wants to work with someone who's like a complete stonewall, a cipher, who's inaccessible.
Yeah.
You can really get out there, be social, make connections with people. It's called social media for a reason.
Yeah.
You can't just put an image up and expect it to do the work for you.
Yeah.
You have to interact with people. You have to be a human being.
Right.
Yeah.
So I also want to, I'm unloading a bunch of stuff here at the beginning, and we'll kind of discuss all of this throughout this podcast. But also I want to bring up your newest venture, which is called Project Prescription.
That's right.
And can you explain? There's some of the marketing material that goes with that, but we also have some pieces of. So explain what Project Prescription is. That way we can go into it.
So Project Prescription is my answer to all the questions I've been asked over the years in my role as a member of Asmp. I work with a lot of students. I work with a lot of photographers at every stage of their career, even veteran photographers who've been doing this for 30 or 40 years. And while most of them are fantastic photographers in their own right, they may not be great writers. They may not be great communicators. They may not have a sense of how they can improve their workflow and their process to really, really make themselves effective visual creatives, how to really serve clients well.
Sure.
This market is incredibly saturated. There's a lot of photographers out there, and a lot of them are really, really good. We're at the point now where being a good photographer isn't going to make you stand out. Being a good photographer is the entry level to get noticed. From there, some of the best ways you can differentiate yourself are on the back end. How you deal with clients, your process, how you build confidence in the people you work with. Not just are you going to deliver great images, but do you have contingency plans for every step of the way? Are you going to solve problems before they come up? How do you convince someone of your value to justify your rates?
Right. And so what is it that you're offering? It's these...
Yeah, so it's a collection of processes, checklists, and documents that can essentially take you from your very, very first conversation with a client all the way through your final delivery, getting testimonials, getting feedback from clients, teaching clients how to be good clients, how to pitch, how to present your work in a beautifully designed manner, because as photographers, we very often have this issue where we think we're good at everything. Because we're a photographer, because we're in a visual industry, a lot of photographers try to do their own graphic design. Doesn't always work out. So I've teamed up with some amazing graphic designers, some amazing writers. In my two partners, Paul Jarvis and Shauna Hayter, who are fantastic. And they originally conceived Project Prescription as a system for graphic designers to serve their industry. I've worked with Shauna for years. She's done all my design and branding for a long time. And when I saw them launch this project, I initially connected to it. I said, there's so much here that I can add to my own system, how I deal with clients, how I talk to people, how I even vet clients and decide who I'm going to work with. So after some initial conversations with them, we decided there's a real opportunity here to help photographers, especially those coming out of some specific situations, those who are emerging into the industry, those who are just coming out of school, and in some cases, those who are maybe in one field of photography, like journalism, maybe had a staff position with layoffs and downsizing in magazines and newspapers, suddenly find themselves in the role of the freelancer. Whereas they had an in-house position with its own process, they're now adapting to the process of being a freelancer very rapidly to get back up and on their feet.
Right. So let's go through, for instance, one of these checklists. I think this is pretty interesting because I kind of have to do this on a regular basis myself. Yeah. And I actually just put out a quote today, and it was hard because they didn't quite had no real budget set yet, didn't have all of their bits of material. Just they didn't know exactly what they wanted. And they didn't know what their budget was.
Sure.
And they wanted a whole bunch of different things. And it's always hard to kind of go through that process of, well, what do I even estimate for something that could range in $10,000 in either direction?
Totally.
So this is an internal client evaluation. So this is something for us, not to show them.
You're not
going
to show this to your client unless you
Right.
want to really have a weird conversation with them down the road.
But I mean, I think all these are really, really good points, and
Yeah.
maybe we can just, as an example, go through this and
Totally,
sort of
totally.
hear your thoughts on it. But
I think one of the most important things that photographers need to learn, especially when they're starting out, is that not every client is the client for you.
right,
That comes with a caveat. Rent has to be paid. Families have to be fed. I get that. But when you have that stability where you really want to move forward with your career, it's time to get a little more selective about who you work with.
right,
What kind of work do you do? Are you primarily a portrait photographer? That's great. If a client is then coming to you and saying, I need you to shoot all this food imagery for a catalog, it might not necessarily be in your wheelhouse. And even if you do take it for the money, is it going to move your career forward? Is it going to provide you the opportunities to shoot the kind of work that are going to help you move forward with what you want to do, which is being a commercial portrait photographer? It also lays out some warning signs to look for with clients, classic red flags that we talk about when we talk about like the mythical client from hell. And most clients aren't that bad. We'll say like 95% of your clients are going to be right in that middle range where they're good clients, they act in good faith, but you're going to have some bumps and some issues with communication down the
Sure.
road that you can smooth over with those kind of clients. You're going to have some dream clients who are going to be fantastic. They're on board with you. They get your work. They get the value that you bring to the table. They like your process. They're great communicators. And then you have those clients who, for one reason or another, may not be a good fit for you. They may not be experienced buyers. They may not understand the value of what you're bringing to the table. They may not understand the return on investment they get from photography. They may be poor communicators, and in some very rare cases, they may be predatory clients who are looking to take advantage of a young photographer, who are looking to take advantage of a student to get some commercial work for their businesses and not really pay for it.
right.
Yeah.
So, and this is the checklist. So when someone comes to you, you hope that they're coming to you for your skill,
Yeah.
that they trust you, that they've seen your work, or they've worked with you in the past.
Exactly.
So, for instance, the person that came to me, I've worked with them in the past on a large budget. I guess that's relative.
Sure.
But on a pretty large budget, especially compared to an editorial job. And we did a bunch of portraits, and so this time she's coming to me again for something similar, but adding on a whole video component.
Okay.
With lots of different videos that are needed, which adds a whole bunch. And a lot of young students and even photographers in the business that haven't done too much don't quite realize what comes into something like that. So you could get, let's say, have a $10,000 budget, but if you're going to be producing 20 videos and doing a couple photo shoots and having to deliver all of these different things, you don't take necessarily into consideration the gear, the time, the post-production, which is, especially when you get into, I don't know how much video you do, if at all.
A little bit.
Yeah. But I mean, the post-production is sometimes the worst part of any shoot.
All of those extraneous costs add up. And some of that knowledge comes with experience, obviously, on our end. The difficult conversation is convincing a client where that meets the realities of their budget. And one of the things that we're very vocal about in Project Prescription is, does your client have a good understanding of what they want to accomplish and what does that realistically cost? Now, there's going to be market variances depending on where you are, what you're shooting, what tier of client it is, what kind of usage they're looking for. But there's so many ways to convince a client of your value. And there's so many red flags that you can run up against that will really tell you this client may not have a great understanding of this project. This client may have unrealistic expectations. This client may not really be looking for what they say they're looking for. All of those are things that you have to watch out for. There's also the more aggressive red flags that we find photographers have to be wary of. That's clients who are diminishing the value of the assignment. One of the things we talk about is people who use a lot of just and only language.
Right.
We just need you for 1 hour. We just need 2 portraits. You show up and they're like, hey, can we sneak 8 or 9 more portraits in while you're there?
Oh, yeah, that's the way it is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so we're not saying instantly disqualify those clients, but those clients, you might need to be more mindful of how you pitch. You might need to be more mindful of laying things out very, very specifically in an estimate and terms to protect yourself. It's really, Project Prescription is really about solving your problems before they happen.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so then as part of Project Prescription, obviously these are just a couple of sheets that go over such and such, but what else comes with it so this is obviously they have to pay folks, photographers pay a fee to gain access to this resource here.
Sure.
And so what is that fee? First of all, they can go to Project Prescription.
It's theprojectprescription.com.
theprojectprescription.com.
And when you show up on our homepage, we say we've got 2 pills, one for designers, one for photographers.
2 pills, nice.
Naturally, I think most of your audience is going to be interested in the photographers section. But it's a collection of numerous documents. It starts off we break it down into 4 sections. And the first is onboarding. That is your initial conversations with a client. We have some options in there for how you start making those initial inroads of communication. We have a getting started guide, which is great for if you're dealing with a client who may not be an educated buyer or an in-house marketing department, as opposed to someone who's at an agency who's a much more educated buyer. And that's going to lay out some of your work, but it really breaks down your philosophy to creating images, some frequently asked questions that new clients often have. It lets you provide testimonials for clients. It's a great first step in establishing that value. And it's also a beautifully designed document. You can insert your own branding into it, insert your own images.
That's really
make
nice.
It your own.
This is really great for new photographers or designers in the business. So it's interesting that you'd also work and do all of this. These are all the different things that are part of this $108 package. And let's be honest here, okay? $108 compared to what that could end up saving you or making you in the future is nothing.
Yes.
And photographers need to consider different types of investment in their business that are costs of doing business.
Yeah.
Insurance, obviously, having a back end like a photo shelter or the computer and gear and so on.
Some of those things really get overlooked. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times emerging photographers have come to me with questions saying, I'm in this situation with a client, I can't get access to this location. And I say to them, why not? And I realize that they've been in business for 1.5 years with no insurance. Stuff like that, looking back on it from our position, it seems like a no-brainer, but these are people taking their very, very first steps into the industry.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so that's all great, what you're doing. And what gave you this? How did you come up with this? Why did you start doing this? Was it because you just felt like you wanted to help the industry? Was this another? I mean, I'm just being straight up. Was it because as photographers, we always are being a good business person, we need to figure out other ways of creating income, passive forms of income. You obviously, having worked with Asmp for a number of years, know what photographers need, know what's missing out there, so you created something. Yeah. Was that the main drive? Was it to create another form of income?
There were a couple parts. I mean, obviously, one, I saw an opportunity there to help photographers, and that's why it's priced at $108. We're extremely dedicated to the fact that this is an accessible tool for photographers. It brings a huge return on investment for very little upfront investment.
Yeah.
We want people to invest in their businesses. I hate it when I see a really talented photographer, and I've known so many over the years. Yeah. Amazing students, amazing photographers who come into this business, guns blazing, they do great work, and they're out of business in 6 months.
Right.
They can't estimate. They don't understand their cost of doing business. They don't understand the realities of dealing with terms of service, contracts, terms. All of those things that we have to deal with, when we take off the photographer hat and we put on the lawyer hat for a few minutes, or we put on the accounting hat for a few minutes. All of that stuff is things they've never been taught. A lot of these people, if they have gone to school, they've probably gone to an art school that doesn't have a lot of business background. I was very lucky to go to a school that taught technical, artistic, and business. When I went to RIT. I went to the Rochester Institute of Technology.
Okay.
Yeah. At the same time, too, I saw an opportunity there to get that knowledge out there to help photographers. I want to see people succeed. I want people to be successful. I want them to live or die by their work. This helps take care of some of those business questions for them. I don't want to see someone make like a simple mistake that wrecks their business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I concur. And also I can say a lot of people are they keep their business and their contacts close to their vest or chest or whatever the word is. But, the reality, at least in and I kind of feel it's the same with you, the more that we help each other, the better the business will be overall, because we don't want to be undercutting each other.
So true.
We want our competition to be charging top dollar, so that when their clients contact us, we're not undercutting. We're gonna.
And I know it's a bit of a microcosm, and I relate things to Buffalo because that's where I'm from. It's definitely not the New York City market. It's a very, very small market. But because it's a small market, it makes it very easy to analyze what's going on. And it's a little anecdotal. I don't really have data to support it.
Sure.
But over the years, one thing that I've seen as Western New York has grown a really flourishing ASMP chapter. And there's so much cooperative education going on. We have really veteran photographers like Jim Kavanaugh and Rhea Anna who have really mentored generations of photographers. And at the same time, they've been in the business for a long time. Younger photographers have come in with knowledge of social media, knowledge of new types of marketing, and it's helped them too. So everyone's helping everyone on all fronts. Because of that education, we've seen a rise in the overall predominant rates in the city. We used to see a lot more aggressive clients. We used to see, I would bid $40,000 for a job and lose it to a student who was shooting it for $2,000. Well, now that student, when he's bidding against me, is bidding $24,000 because they're more educated. They're a little more up to speed on what's going on in the industry.
Right.
And overall, that's helped the industry in Western New York immensely as a whole. Yeah.
Wow.
It really is that example of a rising tide raises all ships.
And so with ASMP, you're national vice chair.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And so I'm a little bit, I guess one of the things that I've always been a little confused, there are different chapters.
There are. Yeah, there's chapters all over the country, broken down regionally. What the function that the chapters serve is really to create community. And that's one mission of ASMP that I didn't really talk about before, is this sense of community. You're not alone. We're all in this together. You're not in the dark.
Right.
There's access to these educational opportunities that National puts out. There's access to legal information that National puts out. But that's not really helpful if you have a question at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday about a term in a contract that you don't understand that a magazine has given you. When I was starting out in my career, and my career took a little bit of a bumpy path because I graduated from RIT and I trained primarily as a still life and food photographer. Mm-hmm. And I graduated and I was super burnt out. I think I worked in the photo industry for about 6 months and then I was done. I ended up working in a factory for 5 years, making signs in an industrial factory, making industrial signage, exit signs, that kind of stuff. And over time, I came back to the photo industry. And because of that gap, I was a little rusty. I wasn't up to speed on what was current in the business world. And because of the ASMP members in Western New York, and then later the ASMP members on the national board that I've become friends with, they've really served as my blueprint for how to do business. They're the people that I can call, at 1 a.m. when I'm having like a business emergency. And not only are they willing to help me, they're excited too.
Right.
There's such an enthusiasm in ASMP to see other ASMP members be successful, to see the photo industry as a whole grow and flourish, become more stable, to see people be able to be successful in this industry.
And online, do you have like Facebook groups and
Sure.
so on?
A lot of the chapters have their own Facebook groups. Western New York's is enormous. I have a couple hundred members. I know it doesn't sound big, but for Western New York, it's pretty enormous. Mm-hmm. And it's a constant conversation. People are posting business questions. And it's a private group just for photographers, so clients aren't getting in there and seeing what we're talking about. But if someone's having an issue, very regularly, almost on a weekly basis, someone is getting an editorial job and they're not quite sure what terms in a contract they need to look out for, or how to approach a magazine to renegotiate their contract. And we've seen some very successful stories come out of that. People being able to get much more favorable terms, being able to do business in a much more succinct and beneficial way to themselves because of the help they've been given by other members. Mm-hmm. It's also great, too, like if you have a pocket wizard go down and you're on set, you call an ASMP member down the street and they'll run one over to you.
That's great. I mean, that's really what our community is about. And that's one of the reasons why we started Photo Brigade, was to sort of create this community and just a general community for all photographers and to share what's going on in the community. So I want to, talk a little bit more about your work.
Of course.
You do some really beautiful portraiture.
Thank you so much.
And it seems like that's really your thing, portraiture, right? I'd say how much of your work is portraiture?
99%.
99%. Yeah. Okay. And your clients, mainly commercial clients, or?
It's a mix. I handle a lot of editorial stuff. So I shoot for Forbes, Popular Science, but I also handle clients like A&E Television, NBC Sports.
Cool.
I've done some shoots in the past for CNN.
And this is all based in Buffalo, or do you travel?
I shoot nationally quite a bit. I travel quite a bit. I'm originally from Canada, so I work in Canada quite a bit as well. Toronto is only about an hour and a half from us, so I'm up there quite a bit.
Are you Canadian?
Stuff. I am.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. We can't help with the presidential election, then, can you?
No, I'm a citizen.
Oh, you're a citizen. Okay, good. That's
nice
to hear.
I've lived in the U.S. since I was 12 years old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what else? I should say, are most of your shoots in the studio?
It depends. Originally, my work was very studio heavy. In the last couple of years, it's become a lot more location based and environmental, if only because that's the direction my clients have been taking. Especially, I do quite a bit of corporate work, quite a bit of commercial, and a lot of editorial. So editorial stuff is almost always going to be on location stuff.
Gotcha.
For me, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow. And so what's next? Like what's the next big thing? Obviously you're going to continue pushing Project Prescription. You're going to continue working with Asmp, doing that thing and building your business in Buffalo. Do you have like I'm curious from your perspective being a businessman, a photographer, and also a promoter of the photo industry and the business of photography. What's 5 years down the line for you? That's a hard one.
Obviously,
huh?
I still want to be shooting. I'd love to see my business grow. Right now, I have a couple pet projects that I'm slowly working towards, one of which is involving my animal photography. I would really like in the next couple of years to set up a network for professional photographers to donate their time to shelters nationally.
Oh, wow. That's
a
great.
service that connects professional photographers with shelters and rescue programs in their areas that are in dire need of imagery. And whether that's dogs or even lately I've been breaking out into farm animal rescue, animals that were rescued or seized from farms where they were abused or mistreated, and they've been given, a second chance. And it's so important to help publicize these organizations. They're very
really
often strapped for budget. They can't afford photography.
Sure.
And yet photography is so intrinsically valuable to what they do and helping people develop an emotional connection to the stories of these animals.
I completely concur, and I really appreciate hearing that. It also feels really good to give back in a way that you can, even though it's not financially to them. Well, it sort of is in a way. You're giving them something that has value, and you're doing it in your own way. So I'd actually, off this podcast, want to talk to you more about that because I'm also looking to create something similar. It's not just all about animals, but that's a great part of it, and doing something on a more national level to get photographers together to donate their time in different capacities for charitable reasons.
Yeah, I think it's such a great way for us to give back. And it also, when photographers want to donate their work, I mean, we all get those calls from an organization who says, I'm a nonprofit, we don't really have a budget. I think it's so important for photographers to keep in mind that sometimes a client is a nonprofit, they're going to call you, and it's something you need to bill for. Other times when you really believe in something, you do it because you love it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I concur with that as well. Okay. Well, I think that we've gone through most of what I wanted to talk with you about. Is there anything that I might have missed that maybe we can talk about in terms of the business of photography, or anything that we just want to let students know who want to follow in our footsteps to have a successful? Because a lot of people come up and say, wow, you've had a successful career. How did you get to this point? And it's different for everybody. It truly is.
It totally is.
Some people have some money, can afford gear, and can start much easier than somebody that doesn't have the money. They need to start from much more from scratch than others, and so on. I don't know.
There's a few that come to mind, and these are questions I get asked really commonly in my role talking and speaking for Asmp, visiting different chapters. The first and probably the most important thing that I can tell most young photographers is, and sadly it kind of takes the art out of what we do a bit, but you have to understand that we now live in an IP economy. And so because of that, I think it's so important for photographers to be mindful about registering their work. You need to be registering your work with the Library of Congress, with the Copyright Office. The ability to be able to have that protection and leverage your work is so important right now. Whether it's simply for controlling the use of your work for your moral reasons, say you're an animal photographer and someone steals your images and uses it to promote a butcher shop or a slaughterhouse.
Right.
Something I'm not crazy about.
Right.
At the same time, too, there's opportunities for revenue there, enforcing your intellectual property, enforcing your copyright when it's been abused commercially. I've been really lucky the last year or two to work with a service called Pixie, who has been really great about helping me manage my IP.
I've received some emails from them. Pixie.
Yeah, I tried them out kind of like as a test on behalf of Asmp, and it's really been wonderful. It's taken the responsibility of having to chase down and have those difficult conversations.
So explain how that works a little bit. I mean, because that's a big thing for me is copyright and copyright infringement. I've had some issues in the past with infringers and had to deal with that in different ways. And the one thing is it's hard. It's hard to constantly, especially if you're a photographer, constantly producing and you have, tens of thousands of images a month or whatever that
the tracking alone, even if you're not having a service like Pixie manage and basically chase down these people that are stealing your work or enforcing it. Just the ability to use their search features that are using facial recognition to find your images all over the internet. It's astounding. My wife's favorite hobby now is just getting on Pixie and finding people using my work.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, I can clear my whole list on a Tuesday and go on like a Friday, and there's hundreds of new hits.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is PIXSY.com.
PIXSY.com.
Yeah. And and there's a charge for this?
Yeah, there is a commission that they charge you when they successfully negotiate the licensing of an image.
So literally you just give them permission to go on your behalf to take care of it.
Well, no, because there were some services in the past that did just that, and they were very aggressive. They went out and they would just kind of they would end up, filing suit against your own clients because they were too aggressive. Pixie, essentially you have to identify a infringement, and then you tell them this specific infringement, and then they will pursue it.
Right.
If they feel it is something that they can successfully pursue. So right now they're really focused in the US and Europe, but they're opening up new markets all the time.
Gotcha.
And it's really, really great. I believe up to a certain point you can use their search feature. It's either free or a very, very low cost. I have a lot of images on there that I search, so I pay like $10 a month.
XSY.com.
But they've successfully negotiated a number of settlements.
So you've made some money off
this?
Yes,
totally, absolutely. And without having to chase down those clients myself.
All right, so here it is, everybody. Pixie.
It's definitely my favorite tool kind of that I use on my day-to-day work right now.
Wow. Very cool, very cool. Well, I'm going to definitely look more into this now then. I think that's a great little plug, and I think it really is important for photographers to really watch their intellectual property and make sure that...
It's so important. I mean, just having that control over knowing where your work is, how it's being used, even if you're not worried about it as like a revenue issue or like loss of revenue, being able to control how your work is being used from a moral standpoint is so important to us. You see it a lot with political campaigns and musicians. Political campaign uses a song of a musician who's extremely morally opposed to their views, and they've had very little recourse on what to do. The other thing I would say is so important for photographers is to get involved with the community, and I don't just mean your local community. I mean, be involved with photography as a culture. Right now, all of these trade organizations, Asmp, APA, they're all working towards goals on behalf of photographers on a governmental level. Yeah. If you're local, be talking to your representatives about small claims remedies for photographers. Be talking to your representatives about modernization of the Copyright Office and the registration system. Yeah. For sure.
It's huge. And they're also making changes to that. They're making it easier for photographers, and hopefully they do, because I know that I've had a lot of problems with that online system and so on. And also, registering things properly and not knowing exactly how to register it based off of...
The intricacies of registration are so difficult. ASMP has some fantastic tutorials, by the way. If anyone wants to check it out, we have a step-by-step guide for how to register your work.
Awesome.
That's super important. But it's the changes going forward. The modernization of copyright law is so important. The last major change we had was the DMCA, Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And as forward-looking as that was, it's not super good right now for a lot of photographers. It very much protects a lot of mass infringers through safe harbor laws. It doesn't make platforms responsible for the content people are posting on them, and very often that leads to commercial use. It can be very confusing for people who are not really studied on it.
Yeah, it'd be amazing if someday, just through Photo Mechanic or Lightroom, there was just an upload function to the Copyright Office that just registered them. Just like you do when you upload to Photo Shelter to an FTP or something.
I mean, I think the best piece of advice that I can give any photographer right now is, and this is what people always get snagged on, like, what do I do about all my old work? Don't worry about the old work right now. If you have a project out there that gets infringed a lot, go ahead, register it as published, but be mindful about, from this day forward, registering all of your unpublished work. Register on a monthly basis, then release stuff after that. That way you're protected, everything. Unregistered, your outtakes, your finals,
See, that's
and then
another
you're
thing
covered.
that drives me crazy about the copyright system, is that you need to register it as published or unpublished. And what is published or unpublished these days?
No one's really been able to give us a great answer on that either. Generally, the rule that I adhere to is I do everything as unpublished. That way I'm covered and protected. If it gets published after the fact, your registration is still valid.
Right, that's true. Yeah. And also, I've found that if there is something wrong with your registration, you can always fix that.
Yes, you can.
So just because you may have registered something incorrectly, should something come about and that become an issue, the precedent has been set that the Copyright Office will go ahead and fix your registration so that it's done properly, because there was no malice in how you meant to meant to copyright it. It's what you meant to do by sending it in. You didn't mean to improperly do it so that
Absolutely. And like I said about the past work, you can go back and register kind of your greatest hits as published. You might take a couple registrations, do it over time, but get protected. I learned the hard way. I have one image that I shot for Popular Science years ago about a kid who built a homemade X-ray machine, this like science genius, like 15-year-old kid who built an X-ray machine himself. And it has been used everywhere.
Yeah.
It's been infringed hundreds of times by pharmaceutical companies, by medical blogs, and being able to protect that image has been so huge for me because it is so often infringed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome, Luke. Well, you heard it. Register your copyright. Very, very important. Check out Project Prescription.
Yep, the Project Prescription.
theprojectprescription.com.
Yep, and definitely check out asmp.org.
asmp.org, which we were showing you earlier. LukeCopping.com.
That's right.
Right? And then you can find Luke on all his Instagram and social media, just at Luke Copping, or
yeah, it's on Twitter I'm Luke_Copping, and on Instagram it's just at Luke Copping.
Awesome, yeah. Awesome. And thanks again to Adorama for the use of this beautiful event space. Thank you to Canon Professional Services for your support, Tenba Bags, and again, thank you so much, Luke, for making your way down south.
Thanks so much, Robert. It's been
to
a pleasure.
Southern New York here in Manhattan, and we will please subscribe to us. Subscribe to our YouTube, Facebook, social media at Photo Brigade, and also check us out on Facebook Live whenever we go live like this. Thanks so much, and we'll see you again next time. Cheers.